Welcome back to Thisdaylive, the Sunday talk show here on the Arise News channel. I still have with me in the studio Professor Bola Akintenewa, Director General, Bulitag Center for International Diplomacy and Strategic Studies. Professor Victor C. Ariole, Professor of French and Francophone Studies at the University of Lagos, Nigeria. And Yemi Damalekun, Executive Director, Enough is Enough. Well, Professor Akintenewa, we'll listen to that conversation with Senator Shehu Sani on some of the topical issues in Nigeria at this moment. I would like to have your take on some of the issues that you raised.
First of all, I'm not surprised that Senator Shehu Sani spoke very objectively. Analytically, I think he made some points. However, I do not agree with some points for reasons of psychology of human differences. Yes. You see, he did say that he's a Nigerian. He believes strongly in a united Nigeria. Okay? Now, that is one school of thought. Now he disagreed with Nnamdi Kanu and Sunday Adeyemo Igboho. Now, Kanu and Igboho belong to a different school of thought. The two of them believe that, look, there is no need belonging to a united Nigeria. Even Shehu Sani told us that initially, the two of them used to believe in a vibrant, in a united Nigeria. But suddenly, they have changed. And he's even asking why. Government should try to find out, to seek understanding of why they now changed from their initial belief in a united Nigeria. So in this case, you will discuss that, you will find out that at least he believes that the other school of thought is equally right. That's why I talked about psychology of human differences. The issue now is that whose school of thought should prevail. So in this case, first point to note is that there's nothing wrong in Shehu Sani not agreeing with those who believe that they should be separated. The second point is that look at what Nelson Mandela has been quoted saying. A freedom fighter that lives in peace with his oppressor is compromised. He's now trying to say that when you are a freedom fighter, in this case, you must prepare either to go to prison, to go on exile, or to accept to go to the grave. Those three conditionalities are said to be the attributes of a true freedom fighter. Now, a true freedom fighter is not an armed robber. He's not an armed bandit. He's not a terrorist. They have an ideological objective they are pursuing. In the process, probably they might have engaged in one form of violent action or the other. But the critical point is that they have the self-determinist approach to issue. Now, when, for instance, he was talking about anything is possible in Nigeria, I agree with him. There's nothing impossible in Nigeria. The international community, many professional students of Nigerian politics have always said that it is only in Nigeria that governance is dictatorially democratic. We talk about democracy as a value, as an objective, but the means of administering, of conducting democracy in Nigeria is necessarily dictatorial. Now, when he did mention, for instance, Goodluck Ebele Jonathan, that he was exceptional, you will see the beauty of the fact that in Nigeria, many people strongly believe the way Shehu Sani had put it in a united Nigeria. Goodluck Jonathan acted like a Nigerian, not an ethnicist. He told us, Sonny was the one telling us that when he was nominating members of the National Electoral Commission, he even asked this same Buhari to nominate. That is openness of mind, objectivity of purpose, and perhaps more significantly, this reminds me, because I do not agree with Shehu Sonny when he is giving us different positions. Anything that is different from Professor Nwosu's approach to election in Nigeria, please, it will not work. Two reasons were fundamentally responsible for the election of MKO Abiola in 1993. The first one was that, according to Professor Nwosu himself, the international community promised the INEC people that if they were able to organize free, fair election, that awards, national, international awards, will be given to them. This now served as a catalytic agent in Nwosu's case. The second one was that he introduced option A4. A4 is you queue up, you know who you are going to vote for. And the counting is not electronically. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 voters. And in this case, everything is put there. You cannot cheat. People may say it's analog, it's archaic, etc. alone. Nigeria of today needs that one.
Prof, we have just a few minutes to go. Professor Aroh, let me come to you.
Well, having known Senator Shehu Sani as a former activist, which...
no, he's still an activist.
Well, I see him as former in my own way because I expect something to come out of him beyond what he's saying now, because I know at the time, before he became senator, somehow he was the one trying to get us out of Boko Haram quagmire by trying to prove that he knows them and he can, find a way to get them out of their thinking. So I still see him that way. But there's nothing wrong in still him retaining his activist position if he still wants. But I don't see that now. What I'm trying to see from his own perspective is that Sunday Igboho and Nnamdi Kanu are like people who are starting their cause and trying to fight against oppression. And they have followers. Just like Yusuf of Boko Haram of then had his own followers also. And I think it's necessary for government to understand it from that perspective and make sure we don't gravitate into what Boko Haram had turned to be. Because both Nnamdi Kanu and Igboho, they have followers. And these are people who are very, very disturbed about the current situation of Nigeria. They are not alone. Most people are disturbed about current situation of Nigeria, but it's something we have to really sit down and say, look, what is the problem, so that we solve it before we get
Prof,
into
on that point
very, very conflagration.
About finding solutions. On that point about...
We must find solutions, yes.
Let's take a short break, another short break, and then we'll be right back. And Thisdaylive, the Sunday talk show, will continue here on the Arise News channel. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Thisdaylive, the Sunday talk show here on the Arise News channel. I still have with me in the studio Professor Bola Akintoye, Director General, Polytech Center for International Diplomacy and Strategic Studies. Yemi Adamolekun, Executive Director, Enough is Enough. And Professor Victor C. Ariole, Professor of French and Francophone Studies at the University of Lagos, Nigeria. Yes, Prof, before we went on that break. Yes.
I prefer out-of-court solution to all this problem, because even we have heard of Spain separatists. Pierre Jumon for today is being pardoned, and the Spanish people are talking of peace, even when they have a greater democratic setup that allow devolution of power. For a place like Barcelona, which is the capital of that Catala, there is something. Government has to learn from those people and know that when people have conscience and fighting for their own minority interest that is not taken care of, there is a need for people to come together and say, okay, how do we go about it? Because you always say majority has this way, minority has this say. The say will not end there. If it's not well taken care of, there will be agitation, and it is allowed. It's not going to Supreme Court and condemning people like Aroh, who is dead now, or Bori, Isaac Boro, that is already dead, and then they are still calling on what the Petroleum Bill today, and we are talking of APCB majority and the proposing 3%, and saying, look, the people who owns the oil field are no more the ones to benefit from this petroleum bill. It's still a problem.
No, they will still benefit.
Yeah, the benefit is very poor. We have seen it now. It's very poor, and people are still going to agitate on that. So it's not normally going always saying majority have their way and minority have their say. There are things that's not supposed to go that way. You still have to call people and put it right. Even as of today, we are talking of China that is celebrating 100 years of communism. We know what is going on there. There are separatists there, but they are still calling them to help them to negotiate and get things right. The Tibetans are there, the Uiguris are there, the Taiwans are there, and they are still working hard to see that they have a correct China by even instituting one country, two systems, which is not normal, but it's still there. So Nigerian government should think twice. It's not a totalitarian or war issue. You are still having Nigerians who say, look, you are majority, you have your way, but our say must still be taken care of, even no matter how minute it is. We move further now to what we are talking about, APC trying to make Nigeria one-party system. It's still the commandeering attitude of the current APC. And you can see a whole Matawale that is leading PDP in a whole Zamfara state defecting. Is it defecting because the PDP is split in Zamfara or what? We don't know, which is wrong. It would have been somebody who is against him that is defecting, not Matawale as a person defecting, which makes everything about Nigeria a bit fraudulent, 419, corruption, galore. And so government should be thinking about it. If they came in to fight corruption, and you see a whole governor leading a whole party, trying to defect when in his own state he's supposed to be the one regulating that party, and is defecting, and the whole Senate president is seeing him being congratulated, and some people are defecting in Senate and they are congratulated. Instead of us remaining silent about it, we seem to see it as glory. I mean, Nigeria should really recant,
well,
please.
Prof, before I
we don't need to see it as glory.
Before I bring Yemi Adamoleko into the conversation, I'd like to stress in particular the conversation we had earlier about the Electoral Act Amendment Bill, the new one, which we're now told provides for total ban of electronic transmission of votes, and which is likely to be introduced at the Senate next Tuesday. The provision forms part of the 121-page document to be laid before the Upper Legislative Assembly at plenary by the chairman of the Senate Committee on Independent National Electoral Commission. The proposed legislation is titled A Bill for an Act to Repeal the Electoral Act No. 6, 2010 and enact the Electoral Act 2021 to regulate the conduct of federal, state, and area councils in the Federal Capital Territory elections and for related matters. But this current draft, which is said to be at variance with what was earlier agreed to by the committees of the two chambers of the legislature, it was gathered, might result in a showdown among the lawmakers when the draft is tabled for debate this week. Yemi Adamoleko, good to have you. Good to see you again this week. Well, this was one of the issues addressed by our guest, Senator Shehu Sani. And his simple response was that, look, anything is possible. Any clause can be inserted overnight by some people, and that we shouldn't be surprised if anything is passed through simply because the government of the day does not believe in reform, and that the government of the day is interested in institutionalizing electoral fraud. What do you think with regard to this suspicious Section 50, subsection 2 of this proposed new legislation?
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. I like the tie and pocket square. Quite nice.
Thank you.
It's good to hear Senator Sonny be honest about what happens in the National Assembly. It probably speaks a bit to also why he didn't, he was booted out, but according to his governor, that they had to remove him because the National Assembly was quite different. But I think it is very interesting, and I'm really looking forward to reading a statement today from either the Senate President or the Speaker of the House of Representatives saying that they were not aware of these manipulations. Because, I mean, the one you talked about electronic transmission is one. Another one that I believe you alluded to as well is the increase in the campaign financing limit. So for presidential candidates, you're now allowed to spend 15 billion naira when the upper limit used to be 1 billion. For a governor, you can now spend 5 billion when the upper limit used to be 200 million. And this is technically in a country that's broke, but we're increasing financing limit for political office holders when we understand how money is being used as a weapon. I mean, I know some women groups are going to speak to that, because the more you increase how much money can be spent, you're also excluding women from participating in elections, because access to financing for women is decidedly lower. Another thing that was also very interesting that they've also amended is INEC's ability to review declaration of results, just to make sure that it wasn't done under duress. So the way the law was currently structured was that the returning officer has the final say, but INEC has 7 days to evaluate, just to make sure that, as we've seen in the past, returning officers are locked up and forced to declare a winner, or with a gun to their head, or whatever the cases were in 2019. But those things were thrown out because INEC didn't have the power to step in and say, well, my officer was under threat, so you can't say because they declared this person winner that it is binding. Our dear members of the National Assembly have also removed that. And then lastly, INEC funds. I think those are the 4 things. I mean, I haven't fully read the document, but these are the 4 things that were highlighted for me by this morning. The way it was written originally was that INEC would get their money in installments starting 2 years in advance of the election, so they have time to plan. It's now been changed to be no later than 1 year. So it literally means that INEC might not get any money for the 2023 elections until April 2022. Meanwhile, they've started, for example, voter registration now, which means they also need financing. But I think this really speaks to why people continue to be upset with members of the National Assembly, and their low trust, their trust barrier continues to go down. Because we wanted diaspora voting, we wanted electronic voting. There were some things that citizens advocated for that were not in the document. Finally, we should have said, okay, we've done this. This is what has been approved. Civil society stakeholders have looked at it, we're fine. And then a few days to it being passed, you then try to make these changes, and especially that electronic transmission. Senator Sonny said it very well, that if your bank account in Akwa Ibom is reflected in Sokoto, it shows why electronic results are a big problem for politicians, because it reduces the avenue to manipulate results. And let's also not forget that INEC has started piloting this thing. They created a portal for last year's elections where people could look and see as they were getting returns on different parts of the country. So for the National Assembly to want to remove this, it is quite serious. And so other point that Senator Sonny made, and I think that's really quite significant, about the political elite and comparing this administration to President Jonathan. I wonder if he's subtly telling us where he might be going to, since he talked about moving parties. But it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, but before we move on, Yemi, I would like you to comment as briefly as you can make it on some of the comments he made about the interception of Nnamdi Kanu, leader of IPOB, and also the attack on the residence of Sunday Adeyemo in Ibadan. Thank
you. I like the points he made about One Nigeria and his connection to his friends or fellow comrades, Femi Falana and Olisa Agbakoba, representing other ethnic parts of the country. But I think fundamentally, we keep talking about this on the show. We focus on the Nnamdi Kanu's, his tactics as problematic as they are. On Sunday Igboho, who didn't come out to support any Yoruba nation. Sunday Igboho came to fame because he stood up to speak for his community. And in the absence of anybody else speaking for the perceived attack on southwest Nigeria, he became a leader. He became a voice around Yoruba Nation, Oduduwa Nation, whatever it's called, thus the planned rally for yesterday. and not just within Nigeria, internationally. People from the diaspora were donating money for logistics, for all sorts, because they saw someone who was giving voice to frustrations. Sunday Igboho, Nnamdi Kanu, Twitter, those three things, two individuals, one a technology platform, are just channels of venting a frustration, venting people's disappointment about a country that continues to treat them less than other parts. Now, as long as the Nigerian government has, and it continues to show that it's not interested in solving fundamental problems, it's not interested in making Nigerians feel more a part of this country, we will continue to have conversations about people who want to secede. Professor Aroh made the point around how it's important for countries to come to a conversation with those who are disgruntled. But President Buhari has shown over and over again that he's not interested in a conversation. So for as long as he's not interested in a conversation, there will be another Nnamdi Kanu, there will be another Sunday Igboho, and we'll continue like this. So it is in the interest of all of us to force this conversation, even if President Buhari doesn't want to have it. Because ultimately, President Buhari is serving at the behest of the Nigerian people who have voted him and said, you be our president. But if our president doesn't want to do what we want him to do, there are means to make this happen. Unfortunately, our National Assembly is a bit busy forging documents.
Well, Yemi, on that note, let's move on to another subject that came up in the conversation with Senator Shehu Sani, and this has to do with the Petroleum Industry Bill. Mixed reactions have trailed the National Assembly's long-awaited passage of the Petroleum Industry Bill, as final documents of the bill were not disclosed to key stakeholders that clamored for its early passage. The new law is expected to dramatically change Nigeria's oil sector by boosting foreign investment and the country's oil revenue, as well as losing government control of the state-owned oil company, the NNPC. It is also expected to change the terms of royalty payments by international oil companies and boost oil and gas exploration across the country.
A bill for an act to provide legal, governance, regulatory and fiscal framework for the Nigerian petroleum industry, the development of host communities, and for related matters 2021 third reading taken, and the bill is passed. We promise Nigerians that we will do our best to pass the petroleum industry bill that have then so far at that time defied passage or defied assent. At least the demons have been defeated in this chamber.
However, given the differences in some of the clauses in the bill passed by both chambers, a joint committee of the House of Representatives and Senate will now be set up to harmonize the legislation before it is sent to President Buhari for his assent. Well, I mean, the big issue here, as I pointed out in the conversation with our guest, is that, look, after the bill was passed by both chambers, Nigerians have now drawn attention to certain things. One, out of the 318 clauses, the fact that the host communities could not get the 5% they were asking for. In fact, one senator was said to have protested that 5% would be a lot of money. But at the end of the day, 3% was approved, and that 3% is not something that the host communities are happy about. The definition of host communities is also another issue. Previously, host communities used to refer to those oil-bearing communities. But now, if you have any pipeline going in front of your house, from Atlas Cove to Mosimi to Kano to Kaduna, you will also take out of the 3%. So the original host communities are saying this is unfair. Now, again, there is the frontier basin that is mentioned in chapter 2 of the PIB as now proposed. Now, this frontier exploratory basins will mean that places that do not even have oil in commercial quantities, like the Lake Chad, like the Borno State, will be collecting 30%. In fact, if you add everything up together, it will be up to about 48%. And so certain concerned stakeholders in the South are saying that lawmakers from the southern part of the country will seem to have gone to that National Assembly to sleep, or to, to doze off, or to spend time on their phone, or to be going up and down like a yo-yo, instead of concentrating on the basic details of a bill that, will be of major interest to their people. And it is for this reason that some stakeholders say it looks like some Northerners have done a coup against the people, the sleepy lawmakers from the South who took part in these deliberations. But of course, Senator Sani drew our attention to the fact that you cannot blame anybody. People go to the National Assembly to defend the interest of their own people. And we should know that whatever is passed is, from the collaboration of both lawmakers from the North and the South. Yemi, I'd like to come back to you. Some of these allegations out there, are they correct? Did our lawmakers from the South go there to sleep? Is any part of the country disadvantaged, particularly the host communities?
Well, I mean, as Senator Sonny said, the focus on the PIB is just a reflection of Nigeria's dependence on oil. And the fact that the communities that actually produce it, again, which ties to this issue of feeling part of Nigeria, and the, advocacy for devolution of powers, such that host communities own whatever resources are beneath their soil, and in a sense, pay a tax to the federal government. And we're going to go back to that, because if, as Nigerians are pushing for this devolution of powers, this PIB becomes null and void in a sense, because it doesn't align with the advocacy for devolution of powers or the proper, proper sharing of resources. But I will say I do agree with Senator Sonny that ultimately anybody who's grandstanding at this point, who is either walking out or doing a press statement or a press release, was part of the deliberations. And it is during the deliberations that you should have, in a sense, raised the flag if there was an issue. And again, it goes back to what I mentioned last week around the refusal of the National Assembly to do electronic voting on some of these things. So it's difficult to track how people vote. Because if it was easy to track how people vote, then you would easily see how the voting happened. And you will see, quote unquote, that all the Southerners, if we want to do it that way, voted this way, and then all the Northerners voted this way. And then you could have a conversation about what that means for a federal Republic of Nigeria. But I think it is important that that is put on the table, the same way the electoral amendment issue is also put on the table, that the National Assembly cannot hide under, oh, we don't know, we weren't paying attention, oh, what happened, because that's not what you were elected to. And it provides an opportunity for citizens to hold their elected representatives accountable. Senator and House of Rep member begin to engage. How did you vote? Where were you when the vote happened? Did you vote this way or that way? So they also know that they own a duty to the people who elected them into office.
Yes, Professor Akinterewa, your thoughts on this?
You see, the definition of a host community is new in the sense that the initial understanding of a host community is in the sense of hosting the oil, the crude oil. The host community being the depository of, oil reserves. Now the new definition is to include the pipelines through which the crude oil passes. So if the pipeline passes through you, you are hosting the pipe and the oil inside. That is the only way you can interpret that. Whereas initially, hosted does not talk about pipelines. It is the reservoir of the crude oil that we now translate. The second point is that, the bill itself is necessarily a replacement of the 1969 Petroleum Act. And I do agree that the objective is to ensure good governance, is to ensure better services, and so on and so forth.
And create a fiscal framework.
Precisely. But when we are talking about whether or not the Southern senators were sleeping, I want to ask the same question, which Shehu Sani made us to understand. Could it not have been smuggling in these areas? And in this case, the senators, had they not been settled, quote and unquote, in the Nigeria sense, how will you be a senator representing the interests of your constituency, and then it will be publicly alleged that you are sleeping? Then they must be good for nothing in this particular case.
Yes, such lawmakers should be recalled.
Precisely.
For
So
going
in
to
this
Abuja
case,
to sleep.
to sleep.
And snore.
And now you now come back, 5% was requested, 3% granted. Now, if the northern senators are smarter, by now coming in with a new definition of a host community in such a way that, look, scientific rigging, scientific fraud is being introduced, who do you blame? And if Joe Sonny says, well, it is, he's saying it indirectly. Indirectly saying, look, at the end of the day, we all come together to discuss. What's the big deal now saying you are going for a press conference and so on and so forth? That is a deductive, conclusion from that.
In fact, Senator Sani used the phrase hypocrisy.
Well, it's still going to happen because people will still go to press and denounce whatever they have done just to extricate themselves against being recalled by their people, as you just mentioned. Because, you see, like the Senate president mentioned, I would have loved him to use the phrase, the doves or the hawks are defeated in this house instead of the demons. I don't expect anybody to be demon in the Senate anyway. But as it is, as far as I'm concerned, they are still going to come together for harmonization. That is what the House of Reps have proposed and what the Senate has proposed will still come out, and then there we will know who are the hawks and who are the doves among them, whether the Senate is the hawk or the House of Reps is the dove. And I expect 3% to be too poor for what is expected of the bill. But then when the time comes, we will definitely see where the hawks are and where the doves are, not necessarily the demons and the angels. For Nigeria to talk about demons and angels is a problem. And as we know, the deputy president, like Sonny mentioned, Omo Agege, we know, somebody who prostrated and for being made as a deputy Senate president, what is he going to say? I mean, he can only allow whatever those who he seem to be the best in the system to propose and allow to go. He will only come out and say, look, I tried my best to. He can't go beyond that. That's where he has to really prove himself as somebody coming from South. But I know that he will not come out to say what his own position ought to be in this kind of debate that is very, very crucial for his people. He won't come out. He will be proposing other bills that has nothing to do with a normal Nigerian problem, which is basically maybe sexual harassment bill. That's what he must be. We are now talking of crucial issue that will help his people, not sexual harassment bill or sexual bill. So he must wake up, the deputy president, just like Sani said. He must prove to his people that he's not just deputy president of the Senate for nothing. And when it comes to harmonization point, that those who are from the South, all of them should wake up and say, look, this is what we stand. The 5% we are talking about must stand. And then we will know that, yes, the doves have won and not the hawks or the devils.
Okay, well, I think that with regard to this petroleum industry bill, Prof. Akintenwa, you raised the point. Yes, the Petroleum Act 1969 is outdated. There's been a need to update it, to modernize it, to change the provisions in line with current realities, and to be able to attract investment. So at the level of principle, yes, it's good that the petroleum industry bill is back on the table, but it is important, that the legislation that will eventually come out of this process will be one that speaks to the interests of all parties concerned and that is seen to be fair and just. The other bill that we've been talking about is the Electoral Act Amendment Bill of 2021. And Yemi made a point that, look, if we're talking about electronic voting and all of that, even in the National Assembly, they don't allow electronic voting as is done elsewhere in the world. so that you will know those who have
Who
taken a
votes for, who
position
votes against.
and those who have abstained and those who voted against. You know, oftentimes what we see on television is voice vote.
Okay.
And oftentimes you see that the National Assembly leadership itself could overrule you.
Exactly.
You know, if what you are saying does not go the way the particular leadership on the seat
Exactly.
wants it. So I think that all of these issues will be resolved. Nigerians will be looking forward to what happens in the National Assembly on Tuesday with the electoral bill, and also what happens going forward with the PIB in the light of the concerns that have been expressed by stakeholders. Let's take another topic. We'll move away from legislation. The political wranglings in Zamfara State may soon be over following the defection of Governor Bello Matawale from the People's Democratic Party to the All Progressives Congress. Matawale jumped ship from the People's Democratic Party at an elaborate ceremony in Gusau, which was attended by many state governors elected under the platform of the ruling APC and other members of the party.
The Zamfara State Governor, Bello Matawale, to know that his plans amount to a decision to vacate office, as no law allows him to cross over to any other party with the governorship mandate statutorily given to the PDP through the ballot box, as already established by the provision of the 1999 Constitution as amended and the standing judgment of the Supreme Court. There is no division in the People's Democratic Party to warrant defection of any of our lawmakers. The PDP hopes that the Zamfara State Governor, Bello Matawale, as well as members of the National and State Assembly from Zamfara State, will take caution. Meanwhile, the National Working Committee of the People's Democratic Party has approved the dissolution of Zamfara State Executive of the party. What happened in Zamfara will be a subject of legal jurisprudence, and that our party will take every necessary action permissible within the law to ensure that our mandate is not stolen.
Okay, the legal provisions, the constitutional provisions being referred to there by Kola Ologbondiyan, the spokesperson of the PDP, will be Section 171 of the 1999 Constitution, Section 68, subsection 1G of the same Constitution, and also Section 109, all dealing with how people come to political office and, whether you can, circumstances under which you can defect or not. And then above all, the Supreme Court ruling in the Zamfara case. You note that the Supreme Court had set aside the participation of the APC and said other political parties should be the ones to take over in Zamfara State. Only for the governor that won on the platform and on the basis of that Supreme Court ruling to now say, he's defecting to the APC. Thus robbing the People's Democratic Party of the victory that it secured from the Supreme Court. But when the PDP insists that the party will go to court, why didn't they go to court in the case of Dave Umahi of Ebonyi, who defected from PDP to APC? Why didn't they go to court in the case of Professor Ben Ayade of Cross River State, who defected in May from PDP to APC? I'll start with you, Professor Aroh.
Well, those ones are not the same as Zamfara's case. In the case of Cross River, as they say up to today, the people there are still majority PDP. It's just the governor on his own maybe wasn't too happy about, but it's also an issue of the governor still remaining the leader of the party. If he decides to defect, then it's left for the people to tell him off, that we don't need you any longer. And then it's left for the people of Cross River to really take him to court and say he's no more personal grata in the state, having defected from the party that is the ruling party and which all of them stand on. The same thing Umahi. They are still PDP dominated the National Assembly or State Assembly. He's the only person who defected. And it still behoves the people of Ebonyi to decide, look, we don't want you again, and go away. But the case of Zamfara is like, what I call sympathetic acquisition of vote to PDP or leadership to PDP by Supreme Court, decided by Supreme Court, completely removing APC from the contest. And so, as we are talking, till the tenure of Matawale is over, there should not be seen to see anything like APC ruling in Zamfara State until, like people say in court, you're a lawyer, such things are vacated. And I wonder how Supreme Court will rule against himself when you talk of allowing such things to happen. Because as it stands today, Matawale is the leader of PDP, being given that honor based on court rulings, not necessarily by election. Because if it's by election, for sure, PDP will not win in Zamfara State. Everybody knows about that. Now, if the court has given PDP that opportunity to rule Zamfara State while waiting for next election, because they seem to see APC as being very, very undisciplined, for them to will be completely exempted from rulership of a whole state. I don't see why Matawale will fall into that particular cage again of indiscipline. Because he seems to be indisciplined, and PDP has right to go and tell him that, look, where you have entered has no, they don't have any name in Zamfara State. They have been really completely exempted by the Supreme Court. And that is right. But for other people like Cross River and Ebonyi, there is still PDP, there is still APC, and they went for contest. And the unfortunate thing is that those people who are supposed to assume the leadership of those states as PDP governors have decided to abscond. And the having absconded does not mean the people have absconded. And their people have come out to say, look, they're on their own. We are still PDP. So, and the governor, of course, is on sideline. He could all be the governor, but he knows that the neck that holds him in that state is still PDP neck. And so he can't move very freely. But in the case of Zamfara, I expect PDP to really wake up and go to the Supreme Court again and let Supreme Court really reaffirm again this stand that Zamfara State is a PDP given by the court, and it should stand so till 2023 comes. So I feel.
Well, still, it will still have to be a matter that will be tested by looking at the relevant laws.
Yes, it has to be tested.
Professor Akintenwa, yes.
I agree essentially with Kola Ologbondiyan, and I also agree with Professor Aroh. We should look at the issues that are basically legal. We have competing interests. We have the political versus the judicial perspective. One, Matawale, thanks to God Almighty and thanks to the Supreme Court, became governor. You rightly pointed that one out. Now, it is the PDP mandate that he's holding. And as Professor Aroh pointed out, when you have a PDP mandate, you are necessarily carrying the political will of all the PDP people, even though if it is by technical default that you became president. Governor. Now, in this particular case, you cannot carry PDP mandate to APC without the express consent of the followership. It is quite different. If he as an individual were he not to be governor, for instance, if you are going as Matawale, as Mr. Matawale, not as His Excellency the Governor, it will be a different kettle of fish, because you did ask the question, Ayade, why didn't they go to court? Why didn't they complain? This particular time, it is simply because PDP had the luck of providing the governor as a result of the court. Now, in this case, APC has a constitution which provides that the incumbent governor in any APC control state is necessarily the head, the leader of the party. Now, that is what they have capitalized on, for instance, for Matawale, for being able to come and declare him leader of the APC in Zamfara State, which generated heated debate. So in this case...
Yes, it's been opposed.
Yes, precisely.
By former Governor Yari and also by Senator Kabiru Marafa.
Now, when you look at that one, there is conflict between the governor going to APC and his followership. You will know that one of the members of House of... the State House, I've forgotten his name.
Yes, a member of the State House of Assembly refused to go with the governor. The deputy governor also refused to go.
Yeah.
Now, this clearly shows that even if we have 200 million people, it is not always the 200 people that are going unidirectionally. We still have some people who maintain dignity of purpose.
Exactly.
And this is very encouraging. They don't have ideology. When Nigeria as a country does not have any ideology, why would you expect a political party to have? Why would you in the morning be PDP, then in the afternoon APC, then in the evening you withdraw?
Corruption.
No. This is institutional corruption par excellence. And if we are fighting corruption, it must be looked into at all levels.
Well, some people will agree with you that the biggest form of corruption in Nigeria is political corruption. Yemi Adamolekun, do you share that view?
Indeed, because political corruption covers everything. I mean, I guess not just political corruption, even as citizens, I don't even know what to frame it. But on this issue, I think Professor Aroh made the point quite clearly. I'm not maybe Professor Aroh, maybe Professor Akintanewa. We vote parties, we don't vote individuals. So when, and as you said, section 68, 171, and 109 of the Constitution speaks to how this representation works. And the only guise, or the only way you can defect without it being a problem, at least that I understand, is if there's internal chaos within your party. And you have 2 factions or 3 factions, and you then say, well, the party no longer represents why I'm here, and then I defect. We actually have a case in court with the, 16 or odd number of senators that defected leading up to the 2015 elections, if I'm not mistaken. It's still in court. Because, and I believe these are the types of cases that the Supreme Court needs to decide quickly, so all this nonsense stops happening. Interpret the Constitution and make it clear that you cannot defect from a party unless there's an internal problem. As far as I understand, there's no internal problem in Zamfara. Neither was there in Ebonyi, neither was there in Cross River. Now, it's also interesting to your point, Dr. Abati, why PDP is now up in arms over Zamfara. And I guess maybe it's the judgments they had that made APC ineligible to run. So in Zamfara in particular, I guess maybe they feel they have a stronger case. But as you rightly said, same thing applies in Cross River and Ebonyi State. And I really think the Supreme Court needs to hear these cases and settle this thing once and for all. So we stop moving. And again, I mean, the fundamental issue is that the parties don't have any ideology. But if at least the Supreme Court lands on that, they are now not able to move. So hopefully that will force some thinking around why we join parties and what we expect them to do.
Okay, thank you, Yemi. Let's take one more topic. The imprisonment of the former South African president, Jacob Zuma, is being delayed after a top court agreed to hear his appeal to a jail term handed down to him last week. Mr. Zuma's supporters gathered outside his home in Nkandla in a show of solidarity, vying to protect him from arrest. Last week, he was sentenced to 15 months imprisonment for refusing to attend a corruption inquiry that asked the Constitutional Court to overturn the ruling because he could be exposed to COVID-19 in prison. Well, I mean, if you look at this case, this is former President Jacob Zuma, former president of South Africa, being now sentenced, to 15 months imprisonment for contempt of court. As it's about an hour ago, his, kinsmen formed a human shield in front of his house because by 12 midnight today, South African time, he's been advised to submit himself to the nearest police station so that he could begin that 15-month imprisonment term. But meanwhile, his lawyers have approached the Constitutional Court to obtain that and to give him the opportunity to also make a case that 15 months imprisonment, is disproportionate to whatever he may have done, called, contempt of court. And his lawyers are also alleging that this is a political trial rather than a case of corruption. But his critics say, well, this is an indication that in South Africa, nobody is above the law. And although he's a former president and a major political figure, that does not give him the right, to ignore judicial process. Prof, let me start with you.
I think Jacob Zuma should go to prison for reasons not far-fetched. He's unnecessarily confusing alleged offenses with contempt of court. The issue was that during his tenure as president, period from 2009 to 2018, it was alleged that he was engaged in graft, in sharp practices, in corruption. And now it is said that an allegation is not necessarily yet an offense, a crime. Now, the deputy chief justice in South Africa chaired a committee to investigate. The committee wanted to establish the extent to which the allegations were tenable. But he refused. He even said Jacob Zuma was quoted as saying that he would prefer to go to prison than cooperating with the committee. He refused. He was summoned many times. This was what led to setting up a committee that now referred the matter to the Constitutional Court in South Africa to now say that, look, Justice Sisi Kampepe was quoted as follows, quote, if with impunity, litigants are allowed to decide which orders they wish to obey and which they wish to ignore, then our Constitution is not worth the paper on which it is written. Now, the people of South Africa, the justices, the judicial system is now saying, look, you might be president, you might have been the president, but the rule of law must take priority. It's not, South Africa is not Nigeria. It's only in Nigeria that President Muhammadu Buhari will say the rule of law is subservient, it's comes after rule of law. No, in South Africa, it is rule of law.
But the people of KwaZulu-Natal, I mean, they've all, many of them are in front of his house now. They formed a human shield. They're saying no policeman can arrest Jacob Zuma. And the policemen, as we speak, nobody is in sight to effect any arrest. Isn't that familiar? Don't we do that in Nigeria too? Where we say, this is our man. You cannot arrest him because he's from our area.
The law should deal with the people too.
So it's not exact to say South Africa is not like Nigeria.
South Africa is not like Nigeria in this issue we are saying because Mr. President of Nigeria has told the people of Nigeria that national security interest comes before rule of law. It is rule of law that should define...
but one major argument in South Africa at the moment is that this is a matter of political conspiracy, with Zuma himself leading it. That's familiar, isn't it, Professor Aroh?
Well, you see, like I told someone somewhere, when it comes to people who assume the title of African kings ruling a nation, it's completely different from assuming democracy will work with them. Well, that's where you really elect someone who has not got that mentality of I'm a king of Zulu, or king of the Igbos, or king of the Yorubas, or king of the Fulanis, ruling a nation. Then it's a different thing. You see, the president of, the person of Zuma commands a lot of respect for the Zulu person. And we know it. Unless you say we just want to... the Zulu, or like they call him Ngazamana or whatever.
Zamalala.
Zamalala, something that is like a whole clan sees him as, look, you touch him, you touch all of us. And so they will come and look like a human shield to save him from being taken away.
Then why rule of law?
No, that's what I'm saying. There is a problem there. And that is why I'm worried about the people they present as president. If you want to be the king of your people, you are not supposed to come to the center or to come to rule a whole nation. Because a nation is decided by rule of law. That's what I'm trying to say. Because if not for the respect or the way they grade Zuma, he wouldn't have taken over from Thabo Mbeki now. But we know that they preferred him to Thabo Mbeki, and even though what he committed right the time he was deputy president of under Jacob Zuma, and nothing happened to him. Under Thabo Mbeki, nothing happened to him. He was still allowed to go free and to become the president of the whole South Africa. They have different constitution from other presidential election, other presidential governance process. I mean, he was elected in the National Assembly as a member of that particular assembly also. So it's like his own party that is being indicted, in effect. Because the same party was the same party that said, look, we don't want Thabo Mbeki any longer. We want Jacob Zuma. So if a whole party is indicted, it means that party must raise up to defend itself. That's exactly what is happening now.
No, it's
but
not rough.
The important thing is that it's just mere, what do you call it again? Not answering to court. What do you call that again? Contempt of court. That's what it is.
No,
and it's very unfortunate. Instead of the real problem, the real fraud, the real what he committed that is very, very fraudulent and corrupt-minded, they are not talking about that. It's not contempt of court.
Let me bring in
very, very
because we still have one more topic to go. Yemi Adamalokum, Jacob Zuma. Is this political conspiracy or an attempt to place himself above the rule of law?
Well, I mean, it could easily be both. I think just as you said, the parallels with Nigeria in terms of how we see political office holders. But I think maybe the different part is the role the judiciary is playing is not having any sacred cows that we seem to have. So maybe to Professor Akintarewa's point, that's where Nigeria might differ. But the point of this is our man, you cannot arrest him, sense of protecting political office holder is also quite familiar. And I think it's an interesting point in just how we see political office and who is above the law. And we've seen it. I mean, Ibori was welcomed with a red carpet even after stealing all of Delta's money. And then they made a big deal that the money must be returned back to Delta State. So interesting examples. But I wanted to make this point before I forget. Earlier, Professor Aroh had made sort of a tongue-in-cheek comment about sexual harassment bill not being as important. I just wanted to note that Professor Aroh is very important. So let's not make light of
Please,
that.
We are adults.
And really grave. Nah, it's
adult
very,
consent.
Okay. Okay. Point well made. Now to China, where the ruling Communist Party has marked its 100th anniversary with a lavish ceremony at the Tiananmen Square in the heart of Beijing. Thousands of military personnel and other citizens attended the event. Air Force planes flew overhead in formation to create the number 100 in the air. President Xi Jinping addressed the crowds and congratulated the country's 92 million party members. During his speech, Xi Jinping said the country would not be bullied and it will never be divided by the people. He said the party had achieved the goal it had set for itself in its first 100 years, building what he called a modestly prosperous society. He added the goal for the party's second century will be to develop the country into a great modern socialist power. Today's events are the climax of weeks of ceremonies and displays, praising the role of the party in bringing vast improvements in the quality of life at home and restoring China's economic, political, and military influence abroad. Okay, very quickly, I mean, we've seen President Xi Jinping, more or less president for life, saying that no other country in the world, nobody on the surface of the earth can intimidate China, and that whoever tries it will be met by this steely response by a total of 1.3 billion people. He didn't mention any specific country, but I guess, listening to him, he probably was referring to the United States. with which China has an unending conflict between autocratic, democracy represented by China, or if you like, autocratic capitalism represented by China, and democratic capitalism, as we may call it, represented by the United States. And then he went on to spell out a vision of the next 100 years for China, which is a vision of technological development and also competition. But what do you think of China? I mean, it will look like China has made a lot of progress in terms of carving a place for itself in the world. And there's resistance in terms of how it engages with the rest of the world. Professor Akintenewa, this is for you.
It was Professor Jean-Baptiste Durozel, a professor on the University of Paris-Sorbonne.
Your former school?
Yes, my former school. Who theorized that tout empire périra. That is, every empire shall perish. In this case, what is happening to the Chinese diplomatologists, they are saying that, look, the American empire has come to an end, and that it is time for the Chinese, without making it public, to enter into the shoes of the Americans in the conduct and management of global affairs. They would say normally that, look, they are very pacific, that their policy, foreign policy, is predicated largely on win-win, that they are not an oppressor, they are not a colonialist, and that they have a set agenda of development. So, marking 100 years of the Communist Party, their agenda, they have learned to withdraw to their shells and plan and re-strategize. And I think that this has been very commendable. Now, it clearly shows 100 years of communism. They do not disagree that capitalism has its own values. But they believe that, look, they need to also promote what they strongly believe in, their own communist methodologies of governance. So, and I think that we as Nigerians, we need to sit down, learn from the capitalist schools and from the socialist schools, and then come up with our own Nigerian version of capitalism and socialism. Because if you look at the way economic development has come to play in China, the Chinese government doesn't allow the importation of, say, automobiles, vehicles like that. The government will insist that, look, you as automobile entrepreneurs, you come to China, you settle down there, you establish, and then you manufacture there. But they don't allow you to come with completely assembled vehicles and be selling. And then they ensure that transfer of technology, is enforced. Unlike in Nigeria in 1972/1975 with Peugeot automobile, it is agreed that they should transfer technology to Nigerian people. And by that time, UTA, Union Transport Aérienne, was bringing CKD parts, completely knocked down parts, flying them from France to Nigeria. But what the local content that's supposed to be given to the Nigerian wasn't given. Chinese are ensuring that. That is one major factor I think we should learn from the Chinese development at 100.
Professor Aroh, we have just about a minute to go.
The interesting thing about China is that they just posited communism as a facade. It's not what is happening as of today. Everybody knows that. And the other thing that is very, very backward in their approach is just having fewer than 8% of Chinese people ruling a whole Chinese population of about 1.3 billion. There are about 95 million members of the party. But the good thing also is that about 790 million Chinese people have been brought out of poverty. which could be said to be the basic issue, which any common person will be interested in.
But there are also human rights abuses.
No, but there is, of course, we know that. No freedom. In Chinese rule, no freedom. No freedom of speech, no freedom of expression. You can't just claim you are free. According to them, there is no way you can allow people to be free and progress. So that's another problem between other people and Chinese people.
Okay,
exactly.
Thank you very much, Professor Aroh. I think we have to draw the curtain here. Thank you also, Yemi Adamolekun. You've been watching Thisdaylive, the Sunday talk show here on Arise News. I'm Ruben Abati. For my entire team here in Lagos, it's bye for now, and thank you very much for watching.